Right now, in this exact second, someone somewhere in the world is tearing off a piece of bread. It is a casual, everyday act. Yet humans have been doing exactly this for 10,000 years without interruption. If you look at this standard historical timeline, we are usually taught a very specific sequence of human development. We start as nomadic hunter-gatherers, eventually learn to farm, and then use those harvested crops to bake bread. But that sequence breaks down completely when we look at the physical evidence. In 2018, archaeologists digging at a site in Jordan called Shubayqa 1 found burnt crumbs of real bread, and those crumbs date back 14,000 years. That is 4 millennia before human beings started farming. This means agriculture did not lead to bread. Bread came first. Early humans did not domesticate wheat to get more food in general. They planted it specifically to guarantee a steady supply of bread. For hundreds of thousands of years, early humans moved freely across the landscape. In the ancient Middle East, small bands wandered, hunting animals and foraging for whatever grew naturally. Somewhere along the way, they crushed wild grass seeds, mixed them with water, and cooked the paste over an open fire. The result was an incredibly satisfying food that offered dense calories and warmth. They liked this flatbread so much that they made a massive biological and strategic trade-off. They gave up their mobility. To control the wild grain, to plant it, protect it, and harvest it on a precise schedule, they had to stay in one place. Settling down in pursuit of a reliable harvest triggered the Neolithic Revolution. Permanent villages formed around these early crop fields in the Fertile Crescent. Once humans committed to staying in place to protect these grain stores, the path toward larger settlements became irreversible. Bread provided the calorie surplus necessary for villages to grow, turning a dietary preference into the structural foundation of the first cities. Once people settled into villages, they immediately had something they needed to defend. In ancient Egypt, surplus grains stored in clay jars became the earliest form of measurable wealth. Storing that wet dough created a fortunate accident. Invisible wild yeast floating in the air landed in the mixture, causing it to bubble and ferment. Baking this fermented dough yielded a light, airy, leavened loaf. The Egyptian state quickly realized the value of this resource. As we can see in these uniquely shaped, state-produced loaves recovered from ancient tombs, baking was a highly organized operation. The laborers who constructed the Great Pyramids were paid their wages entirely in rations of bread and beer. Across the Mediterranean, ancient Greece applied a different kind of value to the loaf. They refined the milling process to produce finely sieved white bread, which they priced out of reach for the working class. The poor were left eating coarse, dark barley bread. A food that started as a reason to settle down quickly became a tool for empires to extract physical labor and visually enforce the divide between the rich and the poor. When Rome rose to power, it built an urban center of staggering density. The imperial capital swelled to over 1 million residents, packing citizens tightly into the neighborhoods surrounding the forum. Roman emperors recognized a brutal political reality. A starving population riots and overthrows leadership, while a fed population remains compliant. To maintain control, they instituted the bread dole, distributing free daily grain to hundreds of thousands of citizens. The poet Juvenal coined the phrase bread and circuses to describe this exact tactic. By providing free food and violent entertainment, Roman leaders kept the massive population distracted and discouraged them from questioning who actually held the power. But this immense public entitlement created a geopolitical nightmare. As this map of Mediterranean trade routes shows, Rome could not feed itself. The entire empire relied on massive, vulnerable shipments of grain flowing out of Egypt and North Africa, bottlenecking directly into the capital. The emperors used bread as their ultimate leverage over the people, but the sheer logistical weight of keeping those trade routes open became the empire's most exposed vulnerability. Fast forward to 18th century France, and the economic burden of this basic food had become crushing. Looking at this breakdown of a French peasant's living expenses, you can see that a staggering 70% of their income went entirely to purchasing bread. When bad harvests and aristocratic hoarding caused prices to spike even further, the peasants starved. Furious crowds marched directly on the Palace of Versailles, demanding the release of the royal grain stores. The scarcity of a single food item proved to be the breaking point for the monarchy. When the state could no longer guarantee the most basic form of survival for its citizens, the political order collapsed into revolution. For nearly all of human history, making a loaf required back-breaking physical labor and unpredictable fermentation. That ended in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Industrial roller mills and commercial yeast strains replaced human hands, churning out perfectly uniform white flour at high speed. Then, in 1928, an American inventor introduced the bread slicing machine. Bread transitioned completely from a volatile political weapon into a tamed plastic-wrapped commodity, stacked high on grocery store shelves. Yet, when global lockdowns confined millions of people to their homes in recent years, many instinctively reverted to the old ways. Home bakers abandoned the grocery aisles and began capturing wild yeast in glass jars, returning to the slow, handmade sourdough techniques of the past. Trapped inside, modern humans were actively recreating the exact same biological fermentation process that ancient hunter-gatherers stumbled upon 14 millennia earlier. The slice sitting on your table is a 10,000-year-old chain reaction. It is the original reason humans stopped wandering, the catalyst for the first writing systems designed to track grain, and the primary fuel for the rise of human civilization. It remains sitting quietly on your kitchen counter, one loaf at a time.